Just imagine.
And as messy as Drake is right now, I can almost bet that there's somebody that wants to turn his faucet off. Because if y'all think Diddy is a mess, Drake, he was being groomed to be next in line, see? What happens when the real details of what happened to XXX?
XXXTentacion's case is getting old, but it's still far from over, and the drama just keeps coming. So you know how we all thought justice was served when X's killers got life in prison? Well, hold up, there's more to the story, and it's messier than ever. Remember those whispers about Drake being involved? Sis, they're not going away, and now we've got some wild claims and potential receipts to unpack. Okay, so let's talk about Dedrick Devin Williams first. If that name sounds familiar, it's because he's one of the dudes who got convicted for X's murder back in 2018.
Mr. Williams, you are the perfect example of why we have a law of principles in this state. When you engage in criminal acts with others, you bear the responsibility for your collective actions. It was you who picked the target in this case. You went inside RIZZLE Motorsports to confirm the identification and what was there, and then you went back out and sat in the vehicle. Now, while you may not have left the vehicle and you may not have brandished the firearm or fired the fatal shots, you are as guilty as they are because you are an essential part of that crime. Without your actions, it would not have happened.
But get this, he's trying to appeal his case, and the gag is his legal team is throwing Drake into the mix. They're claiming Dedrick didn't get a fair trial because certain evidence pointing at other suspects, you know, like the boy, didn't even make it into the courtroom. But before we dive deeper, let's rewind a bit. So last year, Dedrick and his two accomplices, Michael Boatwright and Trayvon Newsome, were sentenced to life for their roles in X's murder. And the details? Straight out of a crime thriller. It all went down on June 18th, 2018, outside RIZZLE Motorsports in Deerfield Beach, Florida. This wasn't just any robbery, it was a straight-up ambush with layers of drama. Picture this, it's a regular sunny day in Florida, and X had plans like anyone else. First stop, Bank of America, where he withdrew a fat stack of cash, $50,000 to be exact. The plan? Probably to treat himself because life was looking up for him at the time. From there, X drove his sleek black BMW i8 to RIZZLE Motorsports in Deerfield Beach, Florida. It's a spot known for motorcycles and watercraft, and he was with his uncle just checking out the goods. Totally chill vibes, right? But lurking in the shadows was a black SUV carrying 4 guys: Dedrick Williams, Robert Allen, Michael Boatwright, and Trayvon Newsome. Here's where it starts to get sketchy. These dudes tailed X and rolled up to the same dealership. Dedrick and Robert even had the audacity to walk into RIZZLE Motorsports like they weren't planning something. Surveillance cameras caught them casually strolling through the store, even passing X while he looked at bikes. And to top it off, they bought black masks while inside. Now, fast forward about 30 minutes later. X and his uncle leave the dealership, and as he gets into his car, boom, the black SUV blocks him in. Things escalated fast. 2 guys, later identified as Boatwright and Newsome, jump out of the SUV. They're not here for small talk. They demand X's valuables. It's chaotic. There's yelling, a struggle, and they're trying to snatch his chain. But X wasn't about to go down without a fight. And then the unthinkable happened. Boatwright, who was clearly the aggressor in this twisted scene, pulled out a gun and shot X multiple times in the neck. Let's pause for a second here. They already had what they wanted, a Louis Vuitton bag stuffed with $50,000, but Boatwright still went back, looked X in the eyes, and pulled the trigger again. It was ruthless. After the attack, the 4 suspects sped off in their SUV, leaving chaos behind. People rushed to help, and the Broward County Fire Department got X to the hospital ASAP. There was a flicker of hope when paramedics briefly revived a pulse, but it wasn't enough. At 4:51 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time, XXXTentacion was pronounced dead.
Deerfield Beach. The rapper XXXTentacion has been shot, apparently targeted while shopping for a motorcycle. Chopper 4 was over the scene on North Dixie Highway near Sample Road. The Broward Sheriff's Office says they got a call about the shooting at around 4 p.m. They say the rapper was transported to an area hospital where the Sheriff's Office says he died. We are continuing to work this story, and we'll have more on the CBSMiami.com website and on CBS 4 News at 7 and 11.
The autopsy later revealed that he bled out from a gunshot wound to the aorta, and he had been hit 3 times in the neck, with each shot dangerously close. The medical examiner, Lori Boyko, testified that the injuries were devastating. Here's where the story takes a turn. The suspects were eventually rounded up and hit with serious charges, including first-degree murder and armed robbery. The trial was intense, with evidence stacking up against them. On March 20th, 2023, after 8 days of testimony, the jury found Michael Boatwright, Trayvon Newsome, and Dedrick Williams guilty on all counts. The sentences were harsh but deserved. Boatwright got 2 consecutive life sentences plus an extra 30 years. Newsome and Williams were also handed life without parole.
More than a week of deliberations in the murder of South Florida rapper XXXTentacion.
The verdict is about to be read in a Fort Lauderdale courtroom. Let's listen in live now.
All right, the verdicts appear to be in proper form. I will publish. In the Circuit Court of the 17th Judicial Circuit in and for Broward County, Florida, the State of Florida versus Dedrick Williams, verdict count 1. We, the jury, find as follows: as to the defendant, Dedrick Williams, in this case, the defendant is guilty of murder in the first degree as charged in the indictment. Count 2. We, the jury, find as follows: as to the defendant, Dedrick Williams, in this case, the defendant is guilty of armed robbery as charged in the indictment. Count 1. We, the jury, find as follows: as to the defendant, Michael Boatwright, in this case, the defendant is guilty of murder in the first degree as charged in the indictment. During the course of the crime committed, did the defendant, Michael Boatwright, actually possess a firearm? Yes. During the course of the crime committed, did the defendant, Michael Boatwright, actually discharge a firearm? Yes. During the course of the crime committed, did the defendant, Michael Boatwright, actually inflict death to Jase Onfroy as a result of discharging a firearm in his possession? Yes. Count 2. We, the jury, find as follows: as to the defendant, Michael Boatwright, in this case, the defendant is guilty of armed robbery as charged in the indictment. During the course of the crime committed, did the defendant, Michael Boatwright, actually possess a firearm? Yes. During the course of the crime committed, did the defendant, Michael Boatwright, actually discharge a firearm? Yes. During the course of the crime committed, did the defendant, Michael Boatwright, actually inflict death to Jase Onfroy as a result of discharging a firearm in his possession? Yes. Verdict, count 1. We, the jury, find as follows: as to the defendant, Trayvon Newsome, in this case, the defendant is guilty of murder in the first degree as charged in the indictment. During the course of the crime committed, did the defendant, Trayvon Newsome, actually possess a firearm? Yes. Count 2. We, the jury, find as follows: as to the defendant, Trayvon Newsome, in this case, the defendant is guilty of armed robbery as charged in the indictment.
As for Robert Allen, the one who cooperated with authorities and pleaded guilty to second-degree murder, he got a reduced sentence: 5 1/3 years in prison, followed by 20 years of probation. Some might call him the snitch, but his testimony helped lock in those convictions.
Who made a comment to you about your testimony?
Trayvon Newsome.
Point him out and identify him in the courtroom as to who you're referring to that made some comments to you.
Second row. He had a blue suit.
Okay, there's 2 people wearing a blue suit. What race is he?
Black.
And is he seated on the end, middle?
In the middle.
Okay. And who's that you're pointing out to?
Trayvon Newsome.
Your Honor, please let the court identify in-court identification of Trayvon Newsome in this case for this matter.
Now, this wasn't just a random robbery gone wrong. It was calculated and cold. These guys followed X, waited for the perfect moment, and executed their plan. But what makes this case hit even harder is the potential gang ties that were brought up in court. While the judge ruled out some of those connections, many believe there's still more to the story. X was only 20 years old and his life was just getting started. His death wasn't just a loss for his family and friends, it sent shockwaves through the music world and his massive fan base. This case reminds us of how quickly things can spiral out of control and the lengths some people will go for money and power. But at least justice was served and the people responsible will spend the rest of their lives behind bars. Now, Dedrick's lawyers are claiming there's way more to this story. They're basically saying the investigation brushed past certain leads, like, oh, I don't know, Drake, and that Dedrick ended up being the scapegoat. Let's not forget that there were rumors swirling about some tension between X and Drake before X's death. And now, Dedrick's team is determined to make sure that gets more attention. Honestly, it's giving a feeling like there's a plot twist that we didn't see coming, but is there any truth to it? So here's the scoop. One of the big sticking points is tied to Drake. The lawyer is focusing on how defense witnesses were handled, and let's just say the prosecution wasn't playing fair. Back in 2020, Dedrick's lawyer submitted a list of witnesses he wanted to call, but the prosecution tried to block all of them. The judge didn't allow that, but told Dedrick's lawyer he needed to explain how each witness supported his defense. The lawyer said this was shady because it forced him to show his strategy to the other side. Messy, right? Here's where it gets juicy. The defense is pointing to an old social media post from X himself, where he said, "If I get killed, it's champagne poppy." In case y'all didn't know, that's Drake's Instagram handle. Not only that, but X also had beef with other rappers connected to Drake, like 600 Breezy and Toronto rapper Top 5. And let's not forget DJ Academics, one of X's close friends, who spilled all kinds of tea on this drama. Academics even claimed X talked about his issues with Drake and made some spicy comments about Drake's mom.
Well, I think it was like the street element.
Yeah, exactly. But the street element only goes so far. You know what I'm saying? And I say that respectfully, because I don't want brother to feel like, you feel me, like I'm stepping on his toes, you feel me? But regardless of anything, there was origin behind what I was doing.
Yeah, I feel like you guys both like.
Speaking of Academics, X once sent him a pic of a Drake lookalike with some shady captions and told him to post it. But Academics was urging him not to play with Drake like that. After the warning came through to X, the post came down, and X claimed his account got hacked. Dedrick's lawyer wanted Academics' testimony locked in because he doesn't live in the US and might not show up in person, but the court only allowed a basic deposition. Imagine missing all the drama he could have spilled in court. X's mom, Cleopatra Bernard, also had something to say. She testified that X and Drake had real beef, like legit tension. She even claimed Drake threw subliminal shots at X in his lyrics. Plus, she talked about X's run-ins with the Migos, including a violent clash, and how 600 Breezy showed up in Florida, posting online about being strapped. She was so worried she talked to X about hiring extra security the day he was killed. But it gets even messier. After being subpoenaed, Drake brought in a heavy-hitter lawyer, Brad Cohen, to block the deposition. Brad wasn't playing. He filed motions to keep Drake out of it, and after a lot of back and forth, the judge completely flipped. Dedrick's lawyer wanted to show video evidence of Drake's staff rejecting the subpoena. Like, they literally kicked it down the road near Drake's house. But nope, the judge sided with Drake's team, blocked the deposition, and tossed the subpoena. Talk about star power working in your favor. Dedrick's lawyer was heated. He argued that the system was shutting down any chance of building a solid defense. Even though X's mom confirmed the beef was real, the court ignored it, and Drake's name got scrubbed from the witness list. The lawyer claimed this was totally unfair, especially since Drake isn't just any celeb, he's Drake. Let's be real, that level of fame might have influenced the judge's decision. So, one of the biggest bombshells in the appeal centers around this gang expert, Dr. Jesse De La Cruz, who came with receipts that could have shaken the whole case. Apparently, Dr. De La Cruz had visual evidence connecting Drake to the same gang as one of the co-defendants, Robert Allen. Like, yes, we're talking about photos of Drake throwing gang signs that matched Allen's. And get this, Drake's crew allegedly had people lurking around X's neighborhood, throwing out threats just before X was killed. But wait, it gets messier. The defense wanted Dr. De La Cruz to unpack all this, along with some eyebrow-raising Drake lyrics. You know that track, I'm Upset? Well, the line SMS XXX, that's the only time I shot below the neck, had people side-eyeing Drake hard. And then in Mob Ties, he drops Louis bags for body bags, which the defense thought was a little too on the nose. Guess what? The judge wasn't having it. Dr. De La Cruz's testimony was shut down, while the prosecution got their own gang expert to testify instead. Make it make sense. The defense was like, how is this fair? but the court wasn't budging. They even tried to bring up Drake and Lil Wayne flashing gang signs and photos, and threw in that whole situation with Toronto rapper Top 5 claiming he was Drake's shooter on social media. Now, the defense wasn't saying Drake pulled the trigger, but they were pointing out the whole gang vibe surrounding these entertainers. But surprise, surprise, the jury didn't get to hear any of this. Y'all, the courtroom games didn't stop there. X's mom spilled some major tea during her testimony, saying she was super worried when 600 Breezy traveled down to Florida because things were already tense with X's beefs. The defense thought that they needed to dive into this gang stuff, but the court kept playing defense block. When they tried to question Robert Allen, the snitch of the century, about his dad's shady dealings, like drug connections and supplying one of the guns used in the murder, the judge slammed the brakes. Even though Allen admitted his dad was involved, the defense wasn't allowed to push further. Talk about sketchy. And let's circle back to Drake, because the state's attorney brought him up while questioning Detective Kershaw. They flat out asked if there was any evidence connecting Drake to the case. Kershaw said they tried verifying Drake's location during the murder by creeping on his Instagram. Like what? Even the defense was like, why were y'all checking Drake's socials if he wasn't a person of interest? The tea here is that Drake was a person of interest, but the investigation into him was weak and basically relied on Instagram stalking. Here's the thing, Migos popped up in this case early on. A month after X's murder, Robert Allen mentioned Migos during a convo with Detective Kershaw. But guess what? The defense wasn't allowed to really dig into this in court. This wasn't some last-minute plot twist. Drake and Migos' names were in the mix for years before the defense officially brought them into their theory. The defense argued that their client didn't get a fair trial, claiming they weren't allowed to fully explore the connections or present the evidence they had. They said the whole situation felt like the court was trying to keep things as quiet as possible. Oh, and let's talk about Detective Kershaw, because there's drama there too. The defense called out the fact that Kershaw gave expert-level opinions on cell phone data when no one from Broward County had been listed as a forensic expert. Like, isn't there a process for that? Expert witnesses have to be officially declared so both sides can prepare. But nah, Kershaw and another guy were just out here dropping expert takes, and one of them even whipped up a visual aid a week before testifying. The defense was heated, calling this unfair and totally unprofessional. At the end of the day, the defense's argument was simple. The trial was a hot mess. Between shutting down key testimony, blocking witnesses, and letting the prosecution slide with moves the defense couldn't pull, they felt their client didn't stand a chance. It's a shady vibe if you think about it. There could be some kind of cover-up going on here. One thing is for sure, there's more to this story than what they let us see.